All right, everyone. So then you cover your phones and headphones. Wait, go ahead and set those blue books aside and try not to destroy them too much. We need to use those until 2025. As you can see, they've got a year on them, so they do get updated. Any people on back in charge? Really quick, since I didn't go over this before, the plan for today, we did a Kahoot, kind of had a slow roll into things. I'm going to talk about RCWs, do a little bit of lecturing. I'm going to try and make it as quick and painless as possible, but it will be really important for you to write some notes because it's going to help you with the activity you're doing, which is the packet in front of you, which are different RCW scenarios. I'm going to explain all that in a little bit. And then we'll have lunch, and then for the rest of the day, as I promised, we would have some free time, or time for you who need to finish up your famous trial stuff. Okay? Questions about that? Sorry, I didn't go over that earlier. No. First, I wanted to pull up your responses from the check-in link. Looks like most of you disagreed, which I was kind of surprised about. Surprised and not surprised, since sometimes you have to argue as an attorney for the side that you don't agree with, right? Some of you came to me and you're like, well, but I think she's guilty. Unfortunately, that's just kind of what we have to deal with. What I really wanted to point out here, since we discussed the trial at length yesterday, was the various responses to the difference between second-degree murder and manslaughter. So most of you, as you can see, talked about intent, right? The intent question mark kind of broke me a little bit, but that's what we're doing today. By the end of today, this will not be a question mark type thing. It won't be I forgot, IDK. Again, a lot of you guys use the word premeditated, which is great. That's what we talked about yesterday. Basically, what we have to do, in the case of Donna Osborne, I think a lot of you are like, oh, I just don't know if she meant to or not. It seems really wishy-washy. But when it actually comes to RCWs identifying an actual crime, usually it's pretty straightforward. The reason it would go to court is if some of these things like intent, like knowingly, are up for argument, which it was yesterday, right? We knew she killed him. She admitted to that. It was, did she mean to and plan ahead, or was she acting in distress, or was it an accident, right? Because it does matter. If you're shooting to injure somebody and accidentally kill them, that does matter to us. So, I think by the end, this is going to be a lot clearer. So, let me go ahead and get started here. Make sure I have the right stuff. Okay. Property crimes probably sounds a little bit boring because we've started talking about crimes against people, right? We talked about murder and manslaughter and assault. We didn't talk as much, right? Because it's summer school, we had like a day. Property crimes, I waited till the end because, like I said, I didn't think a lot of you would be terribly interested, but I think once you actually get into these blue books, you'll find that they are very interesting. So we're talking about property crimes, we're talking about burglary, trespass, vehicle prowl, theft and possession of stolen property, malicious mischief, and arson. So, stuff, right? And I talked about this at the very beginning. You'll find that, unfortunately, depending on who you are, pets count as property, right? If I, run over your dog, I'm actually, damaging or, ruining your property. So, property crimes are, again, take notes on, I will tell you what I really think you should take notes on. Anything else, this would be helpful to you. However, not necessarily necessary for the packet you're about to do. So it's anything of value, personal, tangible, or intangible. We'll talk about what that means. Do we know what tangible means? What is that word? A lot of you guys are poised at this table, like a physical thing, right? My shoes are tangible objects. My emotions, intangible, right? Something that you can't really touch. That's just an example. So a lot of you are going to think about like stealing a car or breaking into a home. Those are obviously really important things, but we also talk about the manner in which you did enter into a home. That does matter. What exactly is considered a dwelling or a building? Because you've been living in the lawyer side of things where everything is up for argument, right? If I say, oh yeah, you broke into that person's house, and you're like, well, I was just in the yard. And it's like, okay, well, there's a fence. Okay, well, there wasn't a fence on the side. Right, we start to get really nitpicky. That's the lawyer's job. These RCW books are used by attorneys and law enforcement, particularly law enforcement. And another thing that's really important to say this over and over, no one has this stuff memorized. If you are on patrol, patrol and you're someone who is actively, out doing, your cop duties, you have this RCW book because it does matter. When you're trying to say, is that a crime? When someone calls in and says, hey, there's a suspicious person walking around my neighborhood with a backpack and a hoodie on. You as an individual, either a dispatch center or as a deputy, have to say, okay, that's not illegal. But what are they doing that is illegal? Right? You can't just tackle every single person you think is suspicious. This is going to be most important. I will have this up again. But if you write this down, it'd be really helpful just to have in front of you, because this is going to help you navigate that blue book. That blue book in front of you is your RCW book, Revised Code of Washington. That has all of our laws in it. The reason it says revised is because laws are constantly changing. So even if you memorize everything in this book, next year, you could be wrong. So Miss Mona and I, you saw us the other day, we were arguing about some of the answers to these RCW scenarios. Because she was like, oh, that's clearly malicious mischief. And I was like, I don't agree. I think it's theft in the first degree. So you have to really look at that RCW book to help answer those questions. And it does matter. So there's 3 things you're going to look for, the top part. There's enters or remains. We're talking about entering into a car, entering into a building, entering into a home that's locked, staying in a building after it's supposed to be closed, going into a place that says no trespassing, right? Entering. So that could be burglary, taking stuff, trespass, again, just unlawful being there, or vehicle prowl. What do we think vehicle prowl means? What does it mean to prowl? I don't see stealing, but going checking cars. Oh, stalking. Stalking is a really good type of word. You will know the definitions of these by the end of the day, because these books will tell you. The second thing is taking something. Theft and burglary, probably a lot of you think they're the same thing. I've been kind of using it as the same thing. They are very different. It's like we're going to work through. PSP is possession of stolen property. So again, if I steal a phone from your bag, that is obviously theft. I have taken your phone from you. Now if I sell it to Tony for $5, and Tony's like, great, I got a phone, and he's sitting there using it, I might be able to charge him with possession of stolen property. You might be thinking, well, Tony didn't know. But there's going to be a lot of information in these blue books about what knowing would be like. Tony should have known that getting an iPhone for $5 that I sell to him on the down low, and it has a background with someone's, children's pictures on it. Tony had to have reasonably suspected that that was a stolen item. And again, that's when you could go to court and claim, I did not know. But for the most part, a lot of it is reasonable doubt. Finally, breaking or baking. Baking referring to arson, which is setting fire. Okay. I heard some of you talk about the word malicious mischief. Do we know what malicious means? Not good? Bad intent? Yes, bad intent. If I say, hey, I like your shoes, I could be like, hey, I like your shoes. Or I could be like your shoes. Right? There's kind of a tone difference. So malicious, having a negative or a bad intent. Right? Malicious mischief, we're going to really break down because a lot of these things are going to fall under that definition. Usually breaking things is kind of the simple. That's why it says break or bake. If you're breaking something, it's considered malicious mischief, more often than not. Now, this will kind of stay there. Hold on to it. I'm going to get, and I know right now it's really fuzzy, okay? But you should be able to identify a certain couple of things. First of all, we've talked about this already with crimes against people. Do you guys remember mens rea? You probably don't remember all the definitions of it, but the intent is really important. So mental states, intent, knowledge. Did they know what they were doing? Were they being reckless? So maybe, again, think about that drunk driver when we talk about crimes against people. If I'm drinking and getting into a car and starting it up, that's reckless, okay? Negligence, again, me not acting a certain way has had an effect. So when it comes to, I leave my stove on accident and I walk out of the building and the whole apartment complex sets fire, that's really important. So then, the very first thing you know is the mental state. Did they mean to? What's their intent? Second is the act. What actually did they do? And then finally, harm or outcome. Again, if I'm smoking a cigarette out in front of a, old abandoned barn on private property and I drop a cigarette and it goes up in flames and no one's hurt and it was an old dilapidated barn anyways, a different outcome than, again, if I, drop a cigarette in front of like an apartment complex and people die, right? So that outcome piece is also really important. The arson one is pretty, important around now because, on 4th of July, people lighting on fireworks. I'm sure you've seen plenty of stories. There's stories every year of kid lights firework and it sparks a huge wildfire that destroys 30 homes and kills 3 people. You might be like, well, that kid didn't know. He was just playing with fireworks. But then we have to investigate and say again, like, the harm is really important. You were lighting off fireworks. Therefore, if you had an adult, it depends on your age. Did they think that you knew? Should your adult have been watching? Then in that case, is the adult, responsible? So how you'll see things in this book. You're gonna see the numbers, 9, 8.5, 2. That part, it's important for the answer because it's the actual name of the law. You don't really need to particularly pay attention to those because that's not something you would memorize. You're always gonna be looking it up. So criminal trespassing 1. When you look in the book, it's gonna say again, in bold, criminal trespassing, and it's gonna have a couple of bullet points telling you what counts as criminal trespassing 1. So, a person is guilty of criminal trespass in the first degree if he or she knowingly enters or remains unlawfully in a building. Then it tells you whether it's trespass or not. So, in this situation, I need to know, okay, they had knowingly, right? She knowingly enters. People pay attention to me, I don't know what they're doing. Knowingly enters, okay, that's important. Action, they entered or remained there. Okay, so remain there means like, again, the department store is closed. Hi, can I help you guys?
Yes, Ms. Moore.
Yes.
We're Marine Tech, and since they have the most beautiful classroom in the whole planet,
Yes.
we're touring the school so that they can
Oh, okay.
know the school.
Okay.
So, can you please tell us what you do here?
In criminal justice?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we're actually law and justice now, so we focus on understanding. We're talking about RCWs right now, so that's the Revised Code of Washington, understanding our laws and how we classify laws. When you talk about first-degree murder versus second-degree murder versus manslaughter. We just did a mock trial during the school year. Miss Mona, who's a former police officer, does defense tactics, building clearing, combat first aid. Cop stuff and law stuff, basically.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you so much. We
You're welcome.
appreciate it. Okay.
And
Now,
then the property in this
I'm here
one
to the-
is a building. Okay, and in this situation, how this is gonna work is you have a scenario, right? It's like Sally is at JCPenney and she's in the department store and she's trying on clothes and all of a sudden all the lights go off and she realizes that the building is closed and locked and she's stuck inside. In that case, mental state, knowing, we could say, yeah, they had the announcement saying, hey, we're closing. The lights were starting to dim. They heard people say, hey, anybody still in the dressing rooms? That could be a thing. Action, again, you are remaining there unlawfully, but in that case, again, you are not choosing to stay there, right? Unless we can prove that you were, right? So another example, so criminal trespassing 2. So that one was 1, right? Do we know that when it comes to first degree murder versus third degree murder, which is worse? Is the lower number worse or the higher number worse? First. So first degree murder is like the worst, right? So you always want to start worst first. So when you're looking, if you're like, okay, I'm looking at the scenario, it looks like this person is entering a building they're not supposed to. Again, they broke into a gas station or something. You're gonna start with criminal trespassing 1. And if you're like, that's not correct, then you move on. So this is the lesser version. So a person is guilty of criminal trespass in the second degree if he or she knowingly enters or remains unlawfully in or upon premise of another under circumstances not constituting criminal trespass So this would be more, so this one that says property, this says premises, so this is in the general areas, that could be outside the building, it could be on a patio area. Again, it does really matter where you are, if you're in the dressing room, or were you hiding, back in the staff area, okay? This one, again, I'm not gonna dwell too long, because I already can see you guys are getting tired. This will make more sense as we get through it. Vehicle prowl is another one we just brought up. So, if a person is guilty of vehicle prowling in the first degree if with intent to commit crimes against a person or property therein, he or she enters or remains unlawfully in a motorhome as defined in RCW. So right there, you're like, oh, they're gonna define what motorhome is, because you might be like, what's a motorhome? Is that like an RV? If a person lives in their car, is that a motorhome? And it says, hey, you gotta go look at this definition. So I asked the same question. I told Mona, I was like, if I live in my car, it's a motorhome. And she's like, no, if you actually go look at the definition, I will give it away now. The definition of a motorhome means there is a actual established cooking area and sleeping area. So unless your Honda Civic has a built-in stove and refrigerator, it's not a motorhome. Or a vessel equipped for propulsion by mechanical means or by sail, which has a cabin equipped with permanently installed sleeping quarters or cooking facilities. So this is talking about, so yeah, maybe, a motorhome doesn't have to be an RV, it could be like a yacht with a little kitchen inside, right? So, in this place, mental state, intent to commit a crime. What that means is checking to see if doors are unlocked. If I'm walking by a bunch of cars and checking the door handles, even if they're locked, my intent is to open it and probably take things. The car or what's inside, right? So if someone's walking by like, I didn't even do anything, your intent was clear. And again, with intent to commit a crime against a person or property they're in, it also depends, do they have a weapon on them? This is gonna become one of the scenarios we go through. It does matter. If you happen to have a machete on you and you're checking, door handles of a car, it's suspicious, right? And it's the problem because you are intending to break the law, and then you also have a weapon with you. Again, I haven't talked about this. When it says two, it will tell you what kind of felony or misdemeanor it is, and we'll talk about that as well. So again, mental state, intent to commit a crime, action, they're remaining there unlawfully, or they're trying to be in their property, a motorhome, or usually water vessel. Okay, I'm gonna push ahead. I told you that we would talk about the difference between theft and burglary. Theft, plain and simple, according to RCWs, it's wrongfully obtaining property of another with intent to deprive, or by a deception, obtain control over property with intent to deprive. What does deprive mean? If you are deprived of something, lack of, you don't have it anymore, right? If I deprive you of water, I'm keeping water from you. So that's really important when it comes to theft. If I'm stealing from you, if I steal your phone, that's sad for you, but also I could be depriving you of your way of communicating to get transportation home. Could be depriving you of access to your bank account. I'm depriving you from a lot. So it's the same thing with the car. You might be thinking, oh, they stole a car, that's messed up. But it's like, yeah, maybe that person can't get to work anymore. They can't go pick up their kids from daycare. So it's a lot more than you think. Have you guys ever seen on like a DVD at the beginning, it's like, oh, like piracy is not a victimless crime. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like if you are pirating music, you're downloading it illegally or distribute it, they're saying, there are actual people who are affected. Something you're gonna see a lot, you don't need to write this down, this is something I just want you to be aware of. The value of the property matters. Whether it's arson, whether it's theft. A lot of times what you're gonna see when you're like, I can't tell the difference between, class 1, class 2, a lot of it has to do with the dollar amount. And in the scenarios you see, it's gonna say this person stole, 10 purses, each valuing $200. Then you kind of have to do the mental math, or math I guess on your phone if you really need to, and see, okay, did it exceed a certain amount? This used to be called, again, names change all the time, but a grand theft auto. So grand theft or grand larceny, that's an actual term, right? They're talking about an actual expense amount. They don't call it petty theft anymore, but petty theft used to mean like, I stole a pack of gum. It was like $2, right? Grand theft is, depends on the cost. If you're stealing a Lamborghini versus stealing a 93 Honda Civic, it does matter. Special property crimes to consider. Again, I don't want to give everything away because this is best to learn when you're doing it yourself. Firearm does matter, but it does not matter what kind. So, very important to know, any sort of firearm, it's all classified as one. Cars, you want to watch for the amount in terms of its value. We're not going to get too into identity theft, but banking account, if I steal a credit card, this is an important thing also. I know I'm saying a lot of words and you guys are like, oh my gosh, let's just get to it. Identity theft and stealing a credit card is not the same thing. And again, this is a scenario and we will walk through this together, but it's important. Some of these things are gonna be really tricky because you're like, oh yeah, identity theft, and you're gonna go and be like, oh, I got the answer. And I'll be like, actually, stealing a credit card and using it to buy a bunch of candy is not identity theft, even though you are pretending to be a different person. I'm gonna push ahead. Okay, we got property damage. That was our third area. We said break or bake, right? Graffiti, crashing into a person's car and driving away, setting fire to someone's house, malicious mischief. I'm gonna say it, the word malicious, and I want you to repeat it after me because it's always a hard one. Malicious. Again, malicious. And I'm gonna say malicious mischief, see? Malicious mischief. Malicious mischief. Okay, so basically I'd write this down. It means property damage. I'm gonna go through a scenario that has malicious mischief because I think it's the most misunderstood one because you probably don't hear that term very often. What I want you to write down is property damage, okay? And same thing, it does matter how extensive the damage is. I'm going to swing a baseball bat to destroy your car. It does matter what kind of damage I did. Did I just break the windshield? Am I doing damage to the body? It really does matter. Also, something we haven't talked about. We did talk about the difference between felony and misdemeanor. Can someone remind me what the difference was? What was the main aspect?
Misdemeanor is something that's not as bad, and
Yeah.
felony is like really bad.
Yeah, and so, but do we remember like there was a thing like in terms of like the punishment? And I'm being really vague. Yeah, stay on.
Oh, felony can actually go to jail for sure, I think, and misdemeanor is either you can have a large sum of money, or you go to jail for less than a year.
Sometimes it's more about, so in this case we're looking more at the punishment because you could get a felony and not serve jail time. You could, so just because you have a felony doesn't necessarily mean you absolutely go to jail. It's more the level of punishment. So I want to make sure I have this perfectly right because I don't want to say the wrong stuff. So a misdemeanor is up to 90 days imprisonment or $1,000 fine. So pretty low, right? Probably if you get, caught shoplifting, a couple candy bars, you're looking more at a misdemeanor, right? Gross misdemeanor, gross meaning large, right? Gross misdemeanor, up to 364 days, so just under a year, and up to a $5,000 fine. So again, misdemeanor, gross misdemeanor means like worse than a regular misdemeanor. And then we have the felony classes that go up, and I'll read off really quick because some of you guys are writing this down as if you're interested. So Class A felony, the worst, up to life imprisonment or $50,000 fine. Class B felony up to 10 years imprisonment, $20,000 fine. Class C felony up to 5 years imprisonment, $10,000 fine. Yeah, it's
So you can get both, like you can get like life imprisonment and
you can very rarely. Again, as we know, it's after, so when Claire Osborne was found not guilty yesterday, that wasn't the end of it. Claire Osborne wasn't just walking off and being like, ha, thank God I can live my life. If you remember, I'm not gonna move, maybe I will a little bit, because it is important. I know people over here cannot see as well, but. So Claire Osborne was found not guilty, but technically she was found guilty of what? Manslaughter, right? So technically she's still guilty, just not in the same way. So then she goes to sentencing, right? And sentencing is a whole other thing where typically the jury would say, okay, we find, Donna Osborne not guilty of murder in the second degree, and we believe, judge, we recommend that she has probation and maybe court-ordered therapy, and, whatever. They could give their thing. The judge at the end, remember, the judge doesn't have that much power during the trial, except that I can say what evidence is allowed. I can decide which questions are allowed. But I, as the judge, you're not trying to convince me of her guilt. You were talking to the jury. I was just the referee. When it comes to sentencing, that is up to the judge. They can listen to recommendations from lawyers, from the jury, but ultimately, like you've probably seen on TikTok where there's like, a person who, shows no remorse, and the judge can be like, you know what, for that, I'm ignoring your, the recommendation of the jury, and I think that you should have life in prison and pay this and do this. They can do that. So judges have a lot more power in sentencing. That was a long answer to your question. I apologize, but again, I know this feels rushed, but normally I have a whole year to do this, and we talk about RCWs all year long, because in the case of Donna Osborne, they had to sit down and pull out the RCW book. Because RCW does, we're going to talk about property crimes today, but they have crimes against a person in there. And they have to sit there and be like, okay, this lady, okay, I'm Chris Powell, or I guess Chris Powell didn't show up to did he show up to the actual crime scene?
Yeah.
Ideally, if Chris Powell had been a good cop, which we all know he wasn't, again, he's sitting there looking around, and he's probably chatting with the people next to him before they make their arrest, trying to figure out, okay, like, what's going on here? She's sitting here calmly, she handed over the gun. We're kind of reading the situation, looking around, we're saying, okay, he is face down, he was shot in the back. We're looking through and we're trying to say, okay, in this situation, it was kind of iffy whether it was second degree murder or manslaughter. That's why it went to trial, right? Okay, so we're gonna do two of these together. So what I need in front of you right now is your packet that I handed out to you and that blue book. I made a last minute decision not to have you use the RCW website because truthfully it sucks. Miss Mona, if you come and take our class ever, Miss Mona is an old fashioned pencil, paper, she likes to print everything out, everything is in book. I'm more of a technology person, but unfortunately I finally relented and the RCW website sucks. If you want to try it out, you can, but it's not helpful at all. The biggest thing you need to know about this book, I want everyone to have it in their hands. You guys know what an appendix is? What's an appendix? Useless? No. Appendices are very important. An appendix is a part of a book. It's the very back, and it tells you where you're going to find certain terms and words. So on page 288, or sorry, the index, is appendix, yeah, index. My bad. I want everyone looking at page 288. Looks like this. The reason this is really important to you is because if you sat through and were like using the table of contents, you would be looking forever. Back here is where you're gonna find words that stick out. So when we're reading a scenario and we go, whoa, that kind of sounded to me like theft. You're gonna go back here and find theft. And we're gonna do this together. But I want you to maybe put a little sticky note or a little bookmark or something. Have that page ready. So this is the same that you have, except I'm missing some terms. I tried to take out some of the other stuff in there, but follow along with me. We're going to read this together first. A complaint is received from Alice Smith advising that she just observed occupants of a vehicle smashing several of her neighbors' mailboxes with a baseball bat. The passenger is the person described as the subject responsible for swinging the bat. You locate the vehicle and make a traffic stop. 15 of the damaged mailboxes were $50 each. One mailbox was $25. The total damage from the mailboxes was $775. Identify the crimes committed. So when we're looking at this, again, if you're like, whoa, I don't know, or I think I know, but I'm not sure. So what we're doing, and again, some of these, this one I will tell you has one crime. It's a nice easy one to start off with. Some of these other ones have multiple crimes and it's gonna get tricky. You gotta kind of put on your critical thinking, patience type hats. So, what's going on here? What's the problem? What's the actual harm done? Yes. Smashing several of the neighbors' mailboxes with baseball bat. Okay, so that's number one. Any other important information about this that we think we might need before we start digging into the RCW book? Helen? Total damage. We know that's gonna be a problem, right? Who's involved? Yeah, she's not part of the crime though. She's just the one who called, right? I heard some people on the mailboxes, yes. But who's doing the crime? The passenger? Just them? Why? Yeah, so the driver's probably aware that the person in the passenger seat is smashing mailboxes and is continuing to drive them, right? So though we're thinking, okay, they're not really here, we're thinking also driver. This is what I'm saying, it takes some critical thinking, because you might not have thought about the driver. But the driver is really important because he knows what's happening, continues to drive. And arguably, this many mailboxes were not going to have been damaged unless the driver was there. You guys remember early in the year, a couple weeks ago, I told you about my brother, right? He drove his friends to a gas station, they robbed it, he drove away. He just dropped them off and drove away. However, he got the exact same punishment, Class C felony, because he drove them there. And they were able to prove that he didn't know that he was dropping them off there. So again, the driver is really important, don't forget about them. Okay, so we have these things. Again, those are your packets. Please write on them as you will, because you will have to kind of go through. Oops. Ah. Sorry, I got too excited. So, I will leave this up while we're working on these together. These are the big three things. So in that scenario, is this an issue of entering, stealing, or damage? Damage, for sure, right? They were not entering anywhere they were not supposed to be. They were on a public street. It's not like they went to their house. They didn't steal any mail or anything. They were just damaging things. Now, is this an issue of arson? Did they set fire to the mailboxes? No. So we're looking probably malicious mischief. So let's go in the back, in the index where I had you flagged, and now let's go to M. Do it with me, people. I need you to physically do this. I know it feels very old-fashioned. All right, so let's go to malicious mischief. I'm on page 299 of the index. I see malicious mischief, physical damage. Or I see up here they have malicious mischief 1. This is where, again, you were gonna have to play around a little bit and decide which one to pick. Let's go ahead and start with malicious mischief 1 on page 138. So let's turn back, 138. Is someone willing to raise their hand and read to me malicious mischief in the first degree? It's at the bottom of page 138. Yeah, Jerry, nice and loud for me.
So it flips the next page,
Yes. Let's just go with the first bullet.
right? Okay. A person is guilty of malicious mischief in the first degree if he or she knowingly and maliciously causes physical damage to the property of another in an amount exceeding $5,000.
Time out right there. Is this more than $5,000? No. So that means let's move on to the next one, okay? So we started with the worst, just in case. Now let's go to malicious mischief in the second degree. Do you want to keep going, Jerry?
A person is guilty of malicious mischief in the second degree if he or she knowingly and maliciously causes physical damage to the property of another in an amount exceeding $750.
Nope. What do we think? Malicious mischief in the second degree. So if you look at your packet, I gave you the first answer, most of it. Let's go ahead and write down malicious mischief in the second degree. We're gonna do another one together. Oh. What do you mean? Did I not give you the right packet? I'm pretty sure I did. Scenario 1. Oh, oops. Sorry, I gave you the wrong one, people. Time out. I think Miss Mona got our stuff mixed up for me. Sorry. What does this want to do? Oh. Time out, people. I'm confused. Does everyone have the wrong one? Oh gosh. Okay. Well, you know what I'm gonna do, because this one. I know I talked a lot. I'm gonna give you a 5-minute break. I'm gonna go hunt down the right ones. I mean, we could do these ones, but I'd rather go the same ones together. So let's come back. What time is it? Let's make it 9:15 just to play it safe, okay? Everyone has this one that says burglary and related crimes. Okay, thank you. Go ahead and take a break until 9:30. Not 9:30, 9:15. Don't get too excited, people.